All right. Leanne, why don't you go ahead and get us started, and as people come
All
on, we
right.
can.
Okay, you got it. Well, hi, everybody. Good evening or good afternoon, wherever you might be tuning in from. I'm Leanne Fleischer with NOAA Certified. I do the social media. I help our members. I do all kinds of things. But anyway, welcome to our Tuesday workshop. I first of all need to mention something we have learned in the last few days, that we need to make sure it's okay with you guys to share these videos. We'll only sharing them on our website or with the people that are registered for the workshops, but we need to make sure that's okay with you. And if it's not, then you are free to go, basically. But I think everyone's fine with that. So I will take questions during the presentation if it's something pertaining to what she's speaking about. If it can wait till the end, we'll save all our questions till the end. But whatever, if you want to raise your hand, if you have an important burning question that you don't want to forget about, go ahead and raise your hand and you can ask that question. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Robin Butler, our host of the workshops, and hope you guys enjoy.
Thank you, Leanne. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here. And yeah, this is going to be an exciting time. I met Lindsay Wood at a tiny house show where she had her tiny house, and she had an incredible story about how she had to go through a builder. A builder didn't do what he was supposed to do, and she had to finish the thing. And her and her husband were like fit to be tied. And she has a great story, but she's been for I don't know how many years in the tiny house world. She's a very big advocate of it. 5 years, okay. And she's going to be talking to us tonight about the 4 types of tiny houses. And she's got a little commercial at the very end. She asked if she could plug what she does, which we said, yeah, that's fine. And with that, Lindsay, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're going to be talking about today?
All right. Well, thank you so much, Leanne and Robin. It's great. I remember Robin and I were just hanging out in Colorado at the People's Tiny House Festival in Colorado. It was a hot, hot day, and now we're all bundled up, and it's winter time, and I've got my heater next to me, and so I remember that conversation, and it's just really fun. If people haven't had a chance to go out to a tiny home show or a festival, this is where the magic happens because we get to connect. But I'm also a huge love of Zoom and being able to be here to connect with everyone because we can't always fly around. I'm also someone that loves our climate and, reducing the use of fossil fuels and protecting our planet is also key. And I think that having these options to come out, talk tiny, which is one of my most favorite things to do, is a favorite. So this is great. That I love the energy that NOAA is doing and putting out there to bring people together to learn more, especially it's open to the public today. So that's great news. So I can start sharing my slides. Does that work?
Yes, why don't we go ahead and see what you have? And,
great. Cool.
And everybody, if you have any questions, burning questions, feel free to raise your hand. I'm sure Lindsay would be happy to answer those questions. If you want to, you can put them in the chat, and we can either keep them until the end, or if it looks like it's pertinent to the existing conversation, then we might jump in and interrupt. And Lindsay, if I have your permission to jump in and interrupt in case something needs to be, I think would be helpful to be clarified and that kind of thing. Okay, great. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
I'm very dynamic. Like I just came from 3 days at the Tiny House Expo in Fresno, talking on stage. You have a much easier time to just, have that question. You got a person right there. So let's just pretend we're all in this really cool place together right now. This place happens to be the Zoom room, and we're going to be talking tiny today. So absolutely, if you've got questions, the one thing I can't do is actually check the chat, or maybe I can. It gets distracting. So I trust. Thank you.
Yeah, no, Leanne's keeping an eye on the chat, Lindsay. So let her keep an eye on that, and then we will go ahead and interrupt you if it's something pertinent.
Great. Perfect. All right. And this is very dynamic. There'll be parts where I'm going to be asking people to come out and, share what they want. If you want to come on screen, that's bonus points, to bring you in the room, it'd be great. So what I want to start with is gratitudes, because that's what I love to start with. Big gratitude for Noah to be creating such a platform for people to have quality built homes. And the story I'm about to share speaks 100% to it. In fact, our entryway into the tiny home world had everything to do with the opposite of quality. And we had to make our way back to quality. So the fact that there are certifications like NOAA, RDI, doing the remote digitized inspections is so important to make sure people have good quality homes. The last thing any of us needs to see is what recently just happened in the RV industry where something burned up in fire. It made it on USA Today. If anyone doesn't know about it, it's out there, you know, and so we don't want that. You know, I'm bummed that that happened to anyone in the industry, but I'm super glad that didn't happen to a tiny home, right? So we want to make sure homes are built safely, and NOAA, the seal of approval is the way that you as a buyer and builder can confirm that. Okay. Next gratitude, we all would not be here without this wonderful fine man, Jay Schaefer, godfather of tiny homes. Jay Schaefer, just so many of you may not know the origin. We may have heard of Jay. Jay lived in an RV in the middle of winter in Iowa when he came up with his idea to go tiny. He wanted something that was built more like a home, so he didn't have to punt all this, you know, heating into his RV. And he wanted something where he, you know, very much similar to what a home feels like, cabinets, furniture, all of that. So big shout out to Jay. Another shout out, every event I ever do, I promote the different companies that have been supporting me. Now 6 shows around the country. This is our total 11th, but somewhere along the way, we said, you know what, when we go out to these shows, let's bring others with us. So from Gold Heat to Univix, Natureloo, Precision Temp, Tiny Freedom, SIA, and Go Tiny Academy. Big thanks to them. We do have a summit coming up, and I can talk a little bit more about that, but this is a way for us to really talk more about building science and the companies that really go into the products that go into the builds where RDI or NOAA RDI actually inspects. So with that, what we're going to cover today is our tiny home story, the 4 types of tiny homes, and the one-stop shop that ties it all together. And we're really going to focus on the 4 types of tiny homes and give an opportunity for people to come out, ask questions, and to even have a tiny home transformation. In the chat, anyone here that wants to go tiny? I notice and recognize some fellow Go Tiny Academy graduates and students currently. We've got Christina Parker and Sharon Haro. I know Sharon's currently building her home, so that's super exciting. Sharon and I connected one-to-one a few years back, and I'm super excited that she's on the mission to making her tiny home dream come true. So speaking of dreams, going way back to 2017, we had a dream, and it started with the fact that we had spent $100,000 in rent. 2009 to 2017, we lived in beautiful Marin County, California, which was great, but very expensive. Everywhere we looked around, it was $1 million to start, and that was like a fixer-upper. So after $100,000 in rent, we thought, you know, we really dream of what many people dream of, home ownership. We wanted ours to be movable and portable because we didn't already own land. We wanted to simplify and be sustainable. Anyone in the chat? I do realize I'm going to open that chat just so I have feedback. Show the chat. Let's see. Can I do that? I guess I can't. You know, that's the one downside to Canva. Okay.
Well, go ahead and put stuff in the chat, guys, and then Leanne will be monitoring that. And so, yeah,
Cool.
what was the question that you want people to put in there?
Yeah, the question is, what is your driving force for going tiny? Some of you are in the middle of it. Some of you are builders. So put that in there. Whatever your vantage point is, what is the driving point? You know, if you're a builder, it might be to provide more affordable housing. If you're buying a tiny home, maybe home ownership. Whatever it may be, in the chat, it's great to get that feedback. Anything coming through, Leanne?
Not yet.
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead and go on, and we'll, when
all
you
right.
hop in, we'll let you know. Now they're
So
starting.
one last thing, when we realized that all of this was really driving the force towards sustainability, right? The smaller the homes, the more sustainable we are on the planet. And just like many people, we watch the channels, right? There's more than these channels, but these are the channels that really have done such a great service to letting us see what other people are doing out there with their cute, adorable kitchens and decks. And, some people put two tiny homes next to each other. I just saw a couple where, husband and wife lived in different tiny homes and right next to each other. And it's really because of these channels that gives us the inspiration, right? If we see something that we just absolutely love about a tiny home, we're probably going to screenshot it, save it, Pinterest it, you name it. So this all was something that I, just like you, 2017, very excited about. So we flew out to Arlington, Texas. We sat on this couch on the third day of the festival next to this builder, and we're really excited about going tiny. And we went forward. Like, we were there in November, and by February 2018, November 2017, by February, we already put down our first deposit. This moment, I always like to say, super smart to make sure when you're working with a builder that there's multiple deposits versus putting 100% down. The only time I recommend 100% is if you're working like with a company like a Clayton or a Champion that's cranking out, hundreds of these a year. That's the only time I've seen 100% required. But
So are
we
you
wanna
saying that
protect
your tiny
ourselves.
house was 45,000 and that was 100%?
No. This was a payment number one. We had three
Oh,
payments.
okay.
So we did a starting, which was usually more. That's usually kind of close to half. Then there's another payment, and then the final payment when we collect the home.
I
Thank
gotcha.
goodness we did that. And here's why. So we got excited. We put our deposit down. We went into the purging mode, right? We had 9 van loads of stuff. My husband's a chef and a caterer. We had, like, at one point, I think 80 utensils just for catering. We weren't even a catering company, but for some reason we acquired, right? We just do that here in America. We are an acquiring culture. So we wanted to step into the simplistic lifestyle. And along that time, then we got exposed to our first picture of our tiny home. I want you to remember the color of these wheels. Just note that they're silver, right? So there we are with our gooseneck 26-foot trailer, 7-foot deck for a total of 33 feet. I think that's right, if that math is correct. But we have, basically, they call it a trailer with a 7-foot deck of a gooseneck. The reason why we wanted a gooseneck is so we could travel. And when you get large in span, you can totally do a bumper pull. But when you're driving around like we did, gooseneck is like by far the best to control, because you've got the axle, you can't see it here, but you've got the axle going into the the neck going into the back axle of the truck. So it's really secure for turns. Versus you've got the back axle, the trailer, and then you've got the wheels somewhere down here. So you've got a pretty big distance if you do it as a bumper pull. But they exist, right? Robin, have you ever certified a 40-foot bumper pull
Oh,
tiny home?
yeah. I don't know if we've done some pretty long ones, but yeah, exactly. With the gooseneck, then the weight, the towing weight is right over or very close to the rear axles of the truck. They have a connector in the bed that this gooseneck fits into, and so the weight is more centered there. It's easier turning. If you're going to be driving it around a lot, this is not a bad option. If you're not, a bumper pull is fine because you're only going to move it once or twice.
And so one of the things with the gooseneck, obviously there's a whole bunch of space that is no longer available, but we did something unique with it. We added a garage under here. So like bikes, and we even put our washer dryer out and under. That way we had no, use of space inside, all that kind of stuff. So eventually, but here we are, back to the story. We got the picture in the trailer. We're so excited. Then we got our framing pictures. Now it's starting to take shape. We actually went and visited the tiny home. Super big recommendation. To go and visit the tiny home means that you can actually walk it, especially in framing mode, because maybe you can catch things that were somehow lost in the communication of email and video and all of that. But we were able to arrive there. It was quite tall. I was a little bit like, now, not everyone drives their tiny home. In fact, most people, I would say 99% of the industry has a transporter come drop it off, and they don't have to ever drive it themselves. But we wanted to be the unicorns and drive our tiny home around. So we got it to this point and then we got the call. Oh, sorry. Then we got the call for another $20,000. So now we're at $65,000 payment. And then this happened, the rescue mission. So we got the call from the builder saying, hey, we're going out of business. You need to come and pick up your unfinished tiny home. You know, jaw drop. I'm like super summarizing that. There was a number of things we tried to do to make it work. But you know, in this moment, there we were in the hot sun of Utah. This is the Bonneville Salt Flats. Couldn't be inside the tiny home. There was nothing hooked up. Couldn't sit in front of the truck. And there we were under there, you know, running the drone. Obviously, one of the big windows was not installed. We had to fix our hatch. It was 7 inches too tall. Eventually, when we changed out our truck, which was the wrong one, we did everything possible wrong with this tiny home, including finding a builder that wasn't able to finish it like we wanted. So we went from done for you to surprise DIY. Turned into the 8-month DIY family project. Super grateful to have a welder brother, my dad that's a handyman, husband that's able to do siding. But this
Hey,
is how
Jordan, can you mute the iPhone? There we go. Thanks.
Thank you. And this is how the bathroom looked. We even had to fix plumbing. In fact, I can see the thing that was wrong right there. They did this weird, they were going to put the on-demand hot water tank right here. I have proof of that. It was the weirdest thing as you walked right in the bathroom, like this giant on-demand hot water system that wouldn't have actually been able to vent correctly. That's only one of many. The electrical system, see this Romex yellow cord was going up to the roof to a solar system running direct current, they call it DC power, going down to the inverter, running through a wood frame structure. Robin, is that a no-no?
Yeah, yeah. Not with solar. You can do it with
Not with solar.
110 and all that other stuff, but solar's
Yeah,
a
this
little
is
bit
fine
different.
to run light switches and lights and all that thing, but they were doing things when they told us they could install the solar, not so. So we ended up using MC4 cable running inside a 3/4 conduit inside, which is a metal piece of conduit that's flexible running through the wood frame. If we had left it that way and they had finished everything and boarded up our walls, very likely we could have been the one with the house on fire. So, you know, these are all things that, you know, we learned. We called this the blood, sweat, tears, and joy part of our lives. We went from that 8-month tiny home, to a 6,000-mile journey going from California to Texas to Colorado. And that's when we found ourselves at festivals. This was the very first festival in Colorado, Tiny House Festival. Had never had a line out the side of, you know, out our home ever. We had never owned a home. We'd only rented. So the fact that there we were with our home finished under our own, you know, devices and having fixed a builder's problem, we were so excited to welcome people from San Luis Obispo in Texas and Arizona. This is even at the Google campus in Silicon Valley. In doing that, we really found our way into something that we felt like this could be something we could do, right? This could be, you know, we just sort of accidentally found our way into a business, but we wanted to make sure our business was based in our values of community, financial freedom, diversity, advocacy. We only have one planet and there's a bunch of people coming after us, right? And we want to leave it better than we found it, because what these kiddos have ahead of them in terms of housing, is housing going to get cheaper or more expensive if we don't build more housing?
We only know
more
one way, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Up and
only
up.
going one way. We are actually at a standstill since 1970s. We have increased population, but we have literally held our numbers and trending lower for building actual homes. So no wonder we're at a precipice of housing crisis.
This is a
So I
good,
started consulting.
this is a good spot right here.
Yeah.
Lindsay, we had a couple of people say chemical sensitivity and cost of housing in the Bay Area. Somebody else said, my reason is home ownership and snowbird living during the winter. Also to live more lightly on the planet using fewer resources in the building, as well as less daily power consumption for heating and cooling.
Yes, yes, yes. And that is the mantra or common statement or whatever you believe in that we need to all collectively keep putting forth, so that the industry, when met with the worlds of building standards and zoning laws, which we're about to talk about next, can be the continual process as to why we need to break down those barriers, cut through the red tape, get to a place where movable tiny homes are seen as viable housing, and it's happening. We're no longer 5 years ago where Dan Fitzpatrick just brought about the first movable tiny home ordinance in the country. We're 5 years later, and multiple cities and counties around the country, as well as the state of Maine, and soon the state of Nevada, are breaking through and creating brand new ways to really say yes to movable tiny homes. So really, we started working one-on-one, and actually this is when Sharon, who's on the call, I think she's still on the call, really started working together in consulting. And that's when the Tiny Home Industry Association came to be in front of me. And what we're really about, Noah's a member, is increasing widespread use of tiny homes as permissible and permanent housing. There's a lot of RVs you can live in during the summer, or campgrounds or whatever, but you can't live in them permanently. And for so many jurisdictions, they see tiny homes as RVs. So we've had to do a lot of breaking down those thought patterns and mindsets. The benefits of membership, you get access to resources that so many people can do advocacy and learn how to develop community. That's a big one, why a lot of people choose to be Thea members. And Thea Thursdays. Noah was featured, I think, earlier this year, right, Robin?
Mhm.
Was it last
Yes.
year? Okay, because that way all of our members get to exposure of all of our commercial members, which Noah is a part of. And there's those Thea Thursdays. This was featuring Wilderwise. So then I started the Go Tiny Academy, and there we go. There's Sharon. And that was a one to many. And inside the academy is what we're going to talk about right now: the 4 types of tiny homes. And the reason why I like to talk about this is that a lot of people don't understand when they're like, I'd love to go tiny. I see them online. Isn't it great? I'm super inspired. But when they say things like, I want to place a tiny home on land and land only, they need to understand there's a difference between building standards, and I'll use my hand, how the home is built, okay? And zoning laws, what is allowed or not allowed on the land, right? The property, kind of that pencil and what it's pointing to. Some areas are unrestricted, gives you a lot more room to roam. In areas where it's urban and suburban, you're most likely going to find zoning laws. Don't have a time to go into all the zoning law practices, but let's just say that they're based on racial practices from like way back when. Redlining, racism, all those kind of things have still made their way and holding into what we call zoning now. And that is where we need to really do a lot of work on the zoning laws. Now that we've done a lot of work on building standards, which is what I'm going to talk about. But before we go there, you got to know, number one, tiny home is a marketing term. I could say a tiny home is a van. I could say a tiny home is a schoolie. I could say a tiny home is a tiny home on wheels. I could say a tiny home is a 500 square foot home that is brought from a factory and placed on wheels. I mean, bought and placed on the ground. So if you go into a city planner and you say, I'd like a tiny home permit, they're likely to not to understand what you're talking about unless something has been approved as a movable tiny home ordinance. Okay. So every type I'm about to talk about is built in a factory, arrives on wheels, and placed on location. Some of them can stay on the wheels. Some of them are removed from the wheels. Okay. So super important to understand that. Number 0, movable tiny home. They are passing and putting definitions of movable tiny homes in municipal codes all over the state of California and places all over the country. But it is not a building standard that is recognized out there. Okay, but it's still on wheels. We love them. It's great. It's not a standard. Number 1 official standard is recreational vehicle built to the NFPA 1192. A lot of people attribute the NFPA 1192 to this RVIA sticker. However, what NOAA certifies to is also NFPA and also the next one. But it's known for temporary living. And this is where we start getting the issue of, I'd like to place a tiny home built to NFPA 1192 on land, but a lot of city officials know that this actual building standard is for temporary living, not for permanent living. So it's that's where a lot of people kind of get a little bit confused. Oops, sorry. Then there's the park model RV, ANSI A119.5. This is where tiny homes are being built to religiously. And this is where NOAA does its wonderful work. Would you say your builders are more building to NFPA than, or sorry, to ANSI than NFPA?
Well, we have our what's called a NOAA Plus standard, and that incorporates ANSI 119.5 for the most part. What the building code officials, well, ANSI 119.5 is for tiny homes that are 8'6" wide or bigger. But the building code officials want some kind of structural standards, and ANSI is the only one with the structural standard. So we do what's called a NOAA Plus that incorporates the ANSI 119.5, and then we plus it with some structural and energy standards.
Yeah, what many people don't know, and you can correct me, I think that the R value, the insulation value of a wall for the park model RV is an R5.
Correct.
That is a very thin wall. Is that right? Is it R5?
R5 in the floor and the walls, and R7 in the ceiling.
Yeah, no one wants to live in that in the middle of winter in Iowa, okay? Like our buddy Schaefer saying, no, I don't want to live in an RV, because you're just pumping a lot of heat. Or the reverse is true if you're in Arizona in the middle of 115-degree heat wave, you're going to be doing a lot of cooling of your space. So they're being built to the best standard possible that's out there. But because there isn't a standard yet for a movable tiny home, we've got to use the best we can do. And then NOAA Plus is the one that takes it that much further. Would you say most builders are building to R11 or 12 or more, or even R19?
Well, we have a requirement of R15 in the walls and R19 in the ceiling now. It's R13, we're going to R15 in January 1. So R13 walls and floors and R19 in the ceilings. And in Blaine County, Idaho, is the only one that's requiring R21 in the walls and the floors and R28 in the ceiling.
Yes. And in fact, this next standard that's being built to is the International Residential Code. Briefly, the International Residential Code is approved by every state in the nation except for Wisconsin. They have their own residential code. There's also a commercial building code that, interestingly enough, the entire country, Wisconsin does approve to, but think more of your commercial property. For residential, think International Residential Code also is known for a number of other names: modular, prefab, factory built. All of what this means, though, is that they're built to a state building code. So, for example, while we're talking about the R value, here in California, it's R38. And I think it might be even either it's already approved to go to R50 or it's in conversation to go to R50. That is a very dense roof. We all know that, you know, heating and cooling and roofing and all of that play a lot of role into the comfort of your home. So here in California, what they did, and also in Colorado, they'll take the code, the IRC, and go one level up, adding in their own elements. And they call it the California Building Code. Colorado, they call it the Colorado Building Code. But these are really, you're built to a state building code. What happens is it's built in a factory, arrives on wheels, and then placed on foundation. So it still can be built away from the site. What's nice about that is that you can take a lot of time that would normally come to building something on location. Now you got to deal with weather, you got to deal with people all coming there, a much higher cost and a longer time frame. When you're building in a factory, you reduce the material costs. And the same thing applies for the NFPA and the ANSI. Everything built in a factory gives a lot more control about temperature, waste. If you're building to models, you know exactly how much materials that you're needing. You don't need to have a giant dumpster out in front for a brand new construction, which happens a lot with brand new construction that are more your brand new buildings. So there's a number of companies out there doing this. And then the final type is the Housing Urban Development, HUD standard. Now with HUD standard, what we're starting to see is companies that are building a little bit differently than your HUD homes. Some people are familiar with HUD housing as like, you know, really poor quality. And granted, that is really where the 40s and 50s mobile homes came from, but it's not your grandma and grandpa's home anymore. right? Look at this beautiful shed roof with the clear story peeking out there. There's a split right here because I've literally been inside this home. 790 square feet, built to HUD standard, and it's seamed right there in the middle. Now, the HUD standard, I mean, I'm not super familiar with all the requirements, but I know that, you know, the International Residential Code or whatever states they're building to is far beyond that. Is it possible, Robin, that manufacturers of ANSI built homes or NFPA are building beyond even the HUD standard?
Most likely not. The HUD standard has it's its own animal, and they have what's called zones in the HUD standard. So depending upon where the house is going to be placed, that it would have to be built to that zone, but it's not a standard or a code. It's not an IRC. For instance, they don't use IPC, International Plumbing Code. They use a different plumbing code for HUD homes and HUD homes only. So it's a little bit different animal than what we're used to. And we don't really do anything. There's only two, I think, companies out there that mainly do inspections of HUD homes, and plus the fact that they need to be 320 square feet or larger.
Yes.
But it is a standard, and it can be built to, and it can be lived in full time. You do get a certificate of occupancy when you build a standard to the HUD home. It's a little more difficult for your inspection and certification, but it certainly can be done.
Yes, it's definitely more expensive. Any builder building to this standard, you're going to want to be building quite a few a year. And having your business has already been in business for a long time. This is not the entry point for the tiny home industry by any means, but it is a national standard. So I will mention California Tiny House has built something. This is the very first home of its kind. We were just featuring it in Fresno, where you've got the trailer chassis, you've got the 320 square feet, and it's movable. Here's the factors that it needs to meet. Those two doors. So there's door one, door two. No loft unless it's declared a storage loft. Minimum 70 square feet for the bedroom for up to two people. They have like this weird 50 square feet for one. I don't know what sleep police are out there, but he's actually, Nick that created this home has created 80 square feet for the bedroom, which is nice and roomy. Then there's that minimum 150 square feet of living space, which can include a kitchen. So that's where we really get into, like, if it's already 150 of just living space, it's likely going to, and it needs to be 320 square feet minimum, it's going to be a little bit bigger size home, but it's still able. This is a 10 wide by 32 long. Totally doable. I towed a 40 long, 8.5 wide home. It was a little scary, but I did it. So it's doable. With a 10 wide, you're definitely going to have to get permits. But here's the unique part. This is what I talked about. I actually have pictures of me holding a helical pier this weekend. It was very exciting. I've never touched one. Permanent foundation system specific to jurisdiction. But when you do a HUD unit, you can actually put it up on helical piers. So you're not having to put in concrete. How many of you, before you even saw these kind of metal adjustable piers or helical piers, thought mostly foundations need to be concrete slabs? I know I did. When I think foundation, I think concrete slab. Well, that's not the case if you've got a sloping hill and you want to put a tiny home there. Think of homes that are on the beach and they want to deal with any flood zone. They're up on stilts, right? They're up on piers. So this has been done decades and decades. So the possibility of us being able to place a unit that's built to a different standard than maybe ANSI or NFPA is possible. And in some cases, it's the only thing allowed given areas that have not been approving movable tiny homes yet. So that's kind of where this industry is taking a look at the loopholes. How can we get into it? This is a summary. So if you want to take a picture of this screenshot, just to give you an idea of where we're at with the type of standards that most builders are building to is the ANSI or a NOAA Plus, NFPA kind of less so. And then some, very few, I can count on one hand because I only know of two that are going through this process to do IRC and HUD. Actually three. So that is the movable tiny home. So anyone interested in a tiny home transformation, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and would like to come out and chat with me a little bit more and get guided on your journey. Anyone going tiny that is looking, or maybe in a situation with their home, you're looking for to place it on land.
Lindsay, we have a comment on here. Ron was saying that meeting the HUD standards is not real difficult, but become a certified as a HUD builder is a difficult part. That's what how he understands it. And
Yes.
the helical piles are, I want to talk a little bit about that. Normally in a manufactured home situation, you have cinder block piers. There, some of them are on concrete pier footings, and then cinder blocks are stacked up with a oak leveling blocks, and then they're strapped with augers that go into the ground, and they're strapped. That's the old way of doing it. These helical piles have come, they're a little pricey, but not compared to all the other things that you have to do. And when you do the helical piles, you still have to put some kind of skirting around your home. That's another requirement, and then access to the home. You have to be careful about those. And then the only other thing I want to say, Lindsay, is you were talking about IRC. I believe that Terry Lathrop had all of his houses built to IRC. Noah did the inspections over there, and he was wanting everything to be built to Appendix Q, which is part of IRC. So that's, I don't know, he had 13 homes put in there, so that would be I don't know if that's something that you would count as an IRC home, but I know that was one of the requirements.
Sure.
For him to get his approval for his little, I guess you would call it a 1 acre
Yep.
community of tiny houses, but they had to meet Appendix Q.
Yeah, because they were affixed to foundation. They were for permanent living. And I'm total agreement, Robin. We, really the biggest question I ask people, so do you want to get a permit or do you want to fly under the radar? And then I got a call like this last night, and she's like, permit, of course. I was like, well, do you understand the world of RVs have been known for temporary living, and where we've been all living is more for permanent living. And now we're doing this hybridization. Think Airbnb is to hotels. Think, Uber and Lyft is to the taxi world. We're disrupting the market with something that's different, very good, flexible for so many benefits, right? Think of what just happened in Florida. It's like, well, if I had my tiny home down there and I had advance notice, I'd be hooking that thing up and driving it out of harm's way. But I will share one of the tiny homes built to NFPA standard, really built close to IRC, withstood the hurricane in Florida when all the homes around them were flattened. And I was like,
we've had
biggest reason they didn't have any eaves, right? When that wind shear hit, it didn't rip up any window, any roofing off the home because there was no eave, because we already drive 80 miles per hour down a road. We're already dealing with, impact of wind all the time. So going back to
we've had one of the tiny homes, Alabama tiny homes, built a home that went into an RV park, and it was a T2 tornado that went through it and ripped all the mobile homes flat. And this one, it did blow it over, but it did no damage. He stood it back up and did a little bit of cosmetics, but it withstood a T2 tornado.
Wow. That is now we have this proof, like we've been around for a number of years, but with this many years and with homes going everywhere, and now with, destructive scenarios like that, it's phenomenal. So let's see, any other questions? Real estate ownership, involved in building a tiny home community, please advise where to speak with this wonderfully. So what I can share with you is joining Thea. There's an entire resource library on how to buy land without buying land, doing your due diligence. It's really Dan Fitzpatrick. He's got 40 years in government and like 25 years as a land developer. Robin also has a lot of experience in land development and real estate development. So there's a lot to know about when you go to build and be a developer of community. And I love all my people that are dedicated to creating more housing beyond yourself, right? I love anyone that wants to just create more housing for their own selves, like we did with our tiny home. But if you can go and create beyond yourself, that's, even better. We just want to make sure you know, the due diligence to do to ensure
Here.
you're meeting the right zoning laws. What are the type of homes? For example, in Federal Heights, Colorado, there is a property that's to be sold, but you can only place HUD units on there. A number of apartment complexes or developers wanted to buy the land, and they've been saying, no, 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 no. So if only HUD units can go on there, and that's just the zoning law, either you change the zoning law, right, to address it, but I don't think you're going to, because they're really not budging. And you go and find the tiny
West
homes that
A.
are built to HUD standard. Was that something from the iPhone?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Jordan, can you throw another mute out there?
So does anyone have any questions that they would like to answer about their own tiny home journey? I am happy to chat about that, even if you're a business and you're at a point where you would love some more guidance. I just trust these transformational moments. I've been doing them for every time I've spoken now. I love doing these. So anyone wanting to get some quick guidance here? You got a few people in the room that can help guide you on your challenge. Anyone? Going once, going twice? All right, I'll jump back in and then we'll open up for conversation.
Okay.
So just to let you all know, this is what I've really created after the builder went bust in the middle of our build. And I've worked with doing consulting one-to-one. Then I realized the one-to-many to really focus on these three aspects. I call it the three pillars of going tiny: the land, the finance, and the build. You basically have to check off all three, right, to make it happen. If you own land, what is it zoned to? Which one are you going to choose? If you need the financing, right? A lot of it, these all relate to one another. And in the academy, I created 6 training modules, from success philosophy, because I truly believe in personal development and a success mindset, to module 1, where I took these 4 types of tiny homes and other trainings inside, including how to price a tiny home, all of those things, putting into building blocks of module 1. In module 2, we really talk about the financing, because financing a personal property versus real property is going to fall into different buckets. It's going to be, different costs, different terms, different length of loan terms as well, whether it's a mortgage, is it a loan? All of that we go into module 2. In module 3, we talk about the land. And this is where we really dive into, the zoning, and then you're making those cross references to, the type of builder you're going to be hiring. And of course, what certification you want to get your home certified to. So I will be featuring NOAA inside my Go Tiny Academy, because I want the industry to be known to my students. Most of my information inside the academy is coming from experts that I really want to make sure are being seen and be visible to the industry of buyers. And module 4, this is the one that's near and dear to my heart, because this is one that started us on everything: how to hire a builder. What are the strategies you want to take? What are the 40 questions that I've put together that you really want to get your builder to answer, or you can answer from their website, to really give yourself a full due diligence viewpoint? Inside my academy, Sharon was witness to this. There were 2 people that were very interested in going with a certain builder. That builder ended up stealing hundreds of thousands of deposits. I was so grateful to say, hey, I'm kind of hearing something in the industry. I think you should probably back away from them. And sure enough, they did, and they weren't a casualty of the situation. One of my academy students that has since signed up recently in the last month or 2, unfortunately, was a casualty of that, theft. So we really want to protect ourselves. We actually hold all the risks. When we put money out to a builder and they have to construct the tiny home, unless you're literally seeing it on site, like on a lot or at a show, and you're ready to buy it as is, that's a different scenario when you then hand over money for them to build. What's really important is that Liberty Bank of Utah, working with NOAA, is going to be utilizing NOAA services to make sure that that builder is doing the right thing at different staging in the time of the build, from the trailer to framing to the electrical, the plumbing, all the way to the finished product. So it's great to have NOAA here to also be your safety check, right? But the builder still owns the company and how they choose to run the company. So we want to make sure, you're making the right choices. I could talk about this for like probably two more hours. And then module 5, we put together the replays, the workbook, the guest speakers, and also you get a complimentary Thea membership because I so believe strongly in giving people access to all the resources that they have at their fingertips so we can create more community and more advocacy for tiny homes across the country. And all of that, including the weekly live meetup for Zoom for 6 months, private tiny home consulting call, $397. But I want to give you all a little thing beyond enjoying the journey. And that is, this is my information if you'd like to connect with me. And I'm going to drop in the chat a chance for you all to schedule a 15 tiny home discovery call. I don't offer these online. I don't put this out on social media. I no longer do that. I only do it when I'm in either person, like live on Zoom, or in person with people. So wanted to give you that all as a gift. And that way we can chat a little bit more about your situation for Going Tiny. So thank you so much, Robin and Leanne. And I'm open to answering questions. We're having a lively conversation.
All right, anybody have any questions, comments, would like to jump in here and talk to Lindsay or myself or Leanne? We're happy, we're open. We're at your service right now. For the next couple of minutes. We got done a little bit early. Good job.
The brain trust is here.
Running through
Yeah.
those. All right, well, if not, then I want to say thank you guys for all of your efforts here. And we are finding out that there's a couple of things that we saw at the show in where was it? In Georgia, Danbury, Georgia, I think. So anyway, yeah, we were just talking about the internet, and they have an internet thing for sale. So I bought 2 of them and we're trying those out. Because when you're going tiny, you don't a lot of times you're moving around, and this works off of a cell tower. So that was about $300, and it's about $120 a month. Just tell you guys about that. And tomorrow we'll be we'll have Scott Banta on tiny house developments, and that Thursday we have our I'm doing your job for you, Leanne, sorry. We're going to be having the our inspectors on. So anyway, with that, we're going to give you so many thanks for joining us, Lindsay, and I believe she'll be back on here next Tuesday. If you want to come back for it'll be a different topic. What are you going to be talking on next Tuesday,
Actually,
Lindsay?
this is a great opportunity. I can take it a number of directions. One thing I forgot to mention, inside the Academy, what I've opened up is actually a whole division section for just real estate investors, people that want to do community development, because that's going to be a different conversation than someone just wants to buy a tiny home, right? So we could go that direction, and I've got like 12 different investment strategies that I've identified for people. So that's more of the investor community developer side. The other one is more advocacy. As I'm tuning in, like, people watch like football games. Like, I'm not watching it while we're doing it, but we literally have the city of Ukiah, County of Mendocino County is on the other side of about to be talking about tiny homes. And that's where I live. And I can take people through the process of what it's like to go and advocate in your own local area to move that forward. So it's either sort of an investor route or advocacy route, or I can blend the two and just do a little touch on both of them.
I think advocacy, Lindsay, would be
Okay.
our best deal. So let's go
Cool.
with that one.
Perfect. Great.
All right,
I will be
Leanne, let me
talking
turn it
about
back to
advocacy.
you, and you can kind of bring us out. Oh, we have
Oh,
a
you
chat.
already stole my thunder. I'm just kidding.
All right, we'll take it again. Give us a repeat.
Right. Christina Parker did say thanks, Lindsay and the Noah gang. I have to head out, but love these chats. So we're glad to hear you guys are enjoying this, getting all this education and information. We appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule to present for us tonight, Lindsay. And we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. Tomorrow night, we have Scott Banta talking about tiny house community development, who is developing one in Volusia. So he's got lots of great information for you guys. So hopefully we'll see you tomorrow night. And with that, I will let you go. Have a great evening, everyone. We'll see you soon.